Welcome to Netfix Recap. Today we will be recapping the 2003 movie, Tears of the Sun. In the start of the movie, we can see civilians running and they are been fired at. Now we see the US Navy aircraft carrier, USS Harry Screwman, somewhere in Africa. And we see another reporter on board in the US aircraft carrier. He is reporting about the war in Nigeria. Just as he was reporting, he got a breaking news that the entire presidential family have been assassinated. Now we see some US Marines, who just landed from a helicopter, and they just came back from battle. And they are been told that they will be redeployed immediately, because they need to go to Nigeria to extract a critical personality ASAP. Next we see the soldiers, taking their briefing regarding the extraction. Their main priority was to find and extract Dr. Lena Hendricks, with international release services. Dr. Lena Hendricks is an American by marriage, and their second objective is to extract 2 nuns and a priest in St. Michael Mission. And they talk about their extraction point. We get to see the US Marines skydiving out of the US Air Force plane into Nigeria at night. Next we see a young lady at night, headed to the river, to go fetch some water. And she gets grabbed from behind, and she attempts to scream, so he tells her to keep quiet. And asks her if she knows Dr. Hendricks, and the frightened lady says yes. She takes the US Marines to Dr. Hendricks, who was carrying out surgery on a patient and was assisted by another lady, who Lieutenant Walters thought was a nun. Dr. Hendricks tells Lieutenant Walter to tell his men to take their guns out, because they were scaring her workers. But Lieutenant Walters tells her that her staffs should be frightened, because when the rebel forces comes, theirs is going to be bloody. So Lieutenant Walters orders his colleague to assist and forward the nun in the operation, while Dr. Hendricks and him have a conversation. Now Dr. Hendricks and Lieutenant Walters are now outside, and she asks him how he plans to evacuate her from there. And he tries to brief her. She now agrees that she was going to be evacuated, but not without the 70 non-US indigents being taken to safety in the borders of Cameroon, which is half a mile away from their current position. He advises her to go pack her stuff, because the rebels are almost at their current position. Dr. Hendricks still insists on getting the non-US indigents out of Nigeria, at least take them to safety in the borders of Cameroon, which was 40 miles away. But Lieutenant Walter keeps on insisting that he can't, because his orders were to get her, the priest and the nun. This made Dr. Hendricks mad at him. She assured him that she was not leaving if he does not meet her demands. Lieutenant Walters had asked her to give him a minute, and he called his superiors, and they had ordered him to handle the situation. So Lieutenant Walters called Dr. Hendricks and told her she won, and asked her to get her people to move in 30 minutes, but they can only take those who can move on their own and not those who were injured. While Dr. Hendricks was packing up her people, Lieutenant Walters discussed with his men, and they had suggested they grab her by force and move with her. They equally argued a little bit if she was an American or not. But Lieutenant Walters was quick to remind them that it is a criminal offense to thug and take her out by force. Now they are set to leave. As Dr. Hendricks was leaving, she felt sad as she looked at the face of the injured who can't walk because they were injured. And she had left them with the priest who had refused to come with them to the US. Just before they leave their hideout, Lieutenant Walters reminds them to only carry things they can carry on their back. This was so that they don't get slowed on the road. As they were about leaving, the nun said she can't join them. She could not leave those poor Africans to suffer out there. Now we can see Lieutenant Walters and his team, leading this homeless Nigerians, who were singing their local song in celebration to their freedom, walking to the extraction point. On their way to their extraction point, Dr. Hendricks tells Lieutenant Whalers that they need to rest, because most of the people were tired and needed rest, and that they have a child who seeks medical attention, but Lieutenant Walters says no at first, but after she insists he says they could rest for 30 minutes. Now they all take a rest, while Lieutenant Walter's men takes their positions to ensure safety of them all. Just as they are resting, a baby starts crying and the Nigerian rebels came close to their location. Lieutenant Walters tells Dr. Hendricks to do whatever it took to keep the crying baby quiet, so that they do not tip the rebels of their current position, so they had to force the baby to be quiet by covering her mouth as the rebels came closer. After a while Lieutenant Walters and his men started walking out to safety. Just as they were walking out, the rebels started heading towards their direction. They had to wait and hide, but soon one of the rebels spotted Dr. Hendricks. But just before he could scream or take a shot, Lieutenant Walters had grabbed him from behind and cut off his throat. Now one of Lieutenant Walters' men had asked Dr. Hendricks, which was still in shock from what she just saw, to move so they can go. But Dr. Hendricks had refused and walked up to Lieutenant Walters and told him that the Nigerian rebels were headed to the mission, and he had to stop them, but Lieutenant Walters had told her he can't do that, because he was risking the lives of his men and the 70 Nigerians that they carried. But Dr. Hendricks kept insisting, but at the end Lieutenant Walters refused. After a while had passed, Dr. Hendricks had come to see and tell Lieutenant Walters to get some rest, and she also used that medium to thank him for saving her life, and he told her he was just doing his job. Now we see the priest and the nun chatting about their faith in God. When the door was slammed open and it was the rebels. They entered inside the church, even when the priest had told them not to come in, because that was the house of God. Soon they asked the priest about the US Marines, and when he could not tell them what they wanted, they killed him alongside the nun. Going back to the Marines, we can see they have successfully gotten to their extraction point. They now throw smoke grenade to alert their pickup helicopters of their position. As the helicopters came closer, when their helicopter touched down, they took Dr. Hendricks, and blocking all 70 Nigerians from getting access to helicopter. And they take off even when Dr. Hendricks was not in support of their actions. And soon they were up in the sky as they flew above the grounds. While they were flying, Lieutenant Walters and his men saw the violence brought upon the land of Nigeria by the rebels, and he felt sorrowful. So he had a change of mind and asked the helicopters to head back to the extraction point. When they got there, they carried 12 Nigerians, all those who were young and tired, and were able to slow them down. Now Dr. Hendricks tells Lieutenant Walters thanks. Now Lieutenant Walters, his team, Dr. Hendricks, and all the Nigerians start walking to safety in Cameroon. This was because the US government was refusing to send more aids, because Lieutenant Walters had disobeyed orders and there was no more aid to send to him. Soon the rebels, which have been tracking Lieutenant Walters, got to the extraction point. And they saw the smoke grenade and they continued tracking them. Now we see Dr. Hendricks, the Nigerians, and Lieutenant Walter with his men all taking a rest. Suddenly it comes to the attention of Lieutenant Walters that the rebels are tracking them. And Lieutenant Walters asking Dr. Hendricks if she knew why anyone will track them. She said she had no idea. Soon Lieutenant Walters and his team starts moving, and they chat on their way. They come across a small village which was filled by the rebels. And the rebels were attacking the civilians. So Lieutenant Walters and his men go in and save these people from death from the rebels. As Lieutenant Walters watched the village, he realized the amount of terror brought by the rebels to this poor Nigerians. After they helped save this Nigerian village, they start heading out one more time to safety. But soon they realized the rebels were tracking them and someone was giving the rebels their exact location. So Lieutenant Walters called, and asked Dr. Hendricks if she trusts all Nigerians with them. She replied yes. But Lieutenant Walters had asked her to point all those who came to the camp where they were residing lastly, so she had pointed some men. And when Lieutenant Walters attempted to search and interrogate them, one of the men attempted to run away. But soon he was gunned down. Then Lieutenant Walters had found out that he was a spy for the rebels. And he was reporting to them regarding this guy. This guy is the son of the former President Ajika, who had escaped the attack. This made him and Lieutenant Walters a target to the rebels, and this was why they were tailing them. So, Lieutenant Walters in his wisdom, decided to call base. And he had informed them about the recent development. But base, who was not interested in influencing Nigerian politics, had told him that they were not interested in the situation. And he should get Dr. Hendricks to safety. Soon Lieutenant Walters left with his men, and all the Nigerians with him, including the president's son. But he left a present for the rebels. He had kept their spy for them, and he added a grenade on him. When the rebels got to their spy, and decided to touch him, and the present that Lieutenant Walters left for them, which happened to be a grenade, presented to them, and they all exploded. Now, to the rebels' greatest surprise, Lieutenant Walters and his men had been around the corner. And they started attacking the remaining rebels by surprise. But the rebels wanted to let Lieutenant Walters and his men know that they were not alone, so the rebels called for reinforcements. Lieutenant Walters and his men were now close to Cameroon. And he had anticipated that the rebels will be expecting and be prepared for them. So he decided to call base. Which turns down help for them, except they drop off the son of the former President Ajika. Because his presence is the reason why the rebels were after them. At this point, Lieutenant Walters finally realized that he was all alone because of his decisions. So he called his men and asked them for their opinion, if they should let the president's son Ajika go or not. His men voted to save him away from the rebels, and believed they will prevail against the rebels. But what they did not realize, was that single moment and decision was going to determine their entire lives. They decided to go forward. But as they went, the rebels were waiting for them. And the rebels were highly prepared, because good men lost their lives fighting to save the Nigerians. Finally, when Lieutenant Walters nearly gave up, the US Air Force Base had finally decided to help them. And they dropped bombs on the rebels, and wiped out the rebel forces on ground. Finally, this Nigerians were in Cameroon, and families reunited with each other. The film ends as we see a helicopter taking Lieutenant Walters and his surfing men with Dr. Hendricks away, as this Nigerians sang to them as heroes. So guys, this is the end. Thank you for staying this long, we really appreciate you. If you think Lieutenant Walters did the right thing, please like this video. If not, comment what was wrong. And if you like our video, subscribe to our channel.